Bill Guentzler. I am the head of acquisitions for Gravitas Ventures, located in Cleveland. And previously, I was the artistic director of the Cleveland International Film Festival for many, many years. And so I'll just kick this off, and I want to thank the Chagrin Documentary Festival, Film Festival, for not only existing, but for bringing filmmakers to Chagrin Falls and inviting me to moderate this panel. And since I'm the moderator, I will moderate. So I don't want to talk too much. So I want all the people on the panel to introduce themselves and their projects, and then we can just have a discussion about not only the documentary film art form, but their individual projects and what got them here to be speaking to all of you.
Cool. My name is Jason Cooper. I have a short film here called Moonshot, which is about this sort of everyday man who had a love for space and turned that love into this beautiful art that he takes. He takes these incredible pictures. And it's just a reminder to look up at the night sky.
I'm Jeremy Schwochow. I have a short here called Looking for Johnson Grass, and it's about my friend who's a grad student who really likes studying this invasive grass a lot. So it's kind of about his passion and him traveling around the States.
My name is Rocky Nguyen, and I am the director of the Superior Pho of Cleveland, which is about the owner of the Superior Pho restaurant in downtown Asiatown. And it tells his refugee story and then, the love of his cuisine.
Hi, my name is Josh Lawhorn. I am the director of Olympic Oaks, which is a story about when Jesse Owens won 4 Olympic gold medals at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. He received 4 English oak saplings, and he brought those back to Ohio. He planted them all around the city, one at Ohio State, one in front of his mom's house, one at East Tech, which is where he attended high school, and one behind James Rhodes High School. The first 3 were lost. The only one that was surviving was the one at James Rhodes High School. And so the Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation partnered with Holden Arboretum to create a sapling and then plant them around the city to continue Jesse Owens' legacy.
Hello, I'm Johnny Wu. I'm the director for the feature film, The History of Cleveland Chinatown. I don't even know my movie title. It's about a Chinese American living in Cleveland for 150 so years, and to tell about their story here, how they survived the diversity, racism, and so on.
Thank you. So I moderated a panel here last year, and I'm going to try to reenact it with a new group of filmmakers because I think it went really well. I think that the most important thing is bringing these filmmakers together to discuss not only their projects, but finding that connection, not only between them being filmmakers themselves and creating a project and discovering the passion that they all share about their subjects. And if any of you are filmmakers as well, that is what is important. It's the passion, and that comes across not only in the films that are here, but the festival itself. Because to run a festival, and I'm looking directly at Marianne right now, to run a festival and all the staff and volunteers here requires passion too. And so I think that a documentary film festival, just like this one, especially in a village like Chagrin Falls, really just displays the passion that it takes and the emotion that is connected to a documentary film, because when you think about documentary itself, it's telling a story, but it's being honest and it's being truthful, and it's not creating something that's not that is not true and pure, essentially. So on those notes, I just want to kind of have everybody explain how they came to their project. What inspired them to create that project and want to tell that story to the world. And so if everybody just wants to go down, and then, it's probably easiest if anybody has any questions. I have some lined up too, but it's better to have a conversation with the people in the audience as well.
So where am I?
Just where you came to, your project and
Sure.
Why.
Okay, so, well, I love making docs, and inspiration sort of just strikes you, and I've done this before, where it's sort of I indulge my own curiosity. And in this case, I saw a picture of the moon online, and it was like looking at the moon and not recognizing it. You're so familiar with it, but you don't really, I don't know if many people just go and gaze at it, probably not. So I looked up the artist, and it was this photographer who was posting pictures, and I reached out to him, and he told me his story of just being, he was a computer programmer who just liked taking pictures of the moon. And they were so incredible. One of them got, I don't know if there were Reddit people here, but one of them got like 50,000 votes on Reddit, which is huge, and was the most popular image for the year, I think, on all of Reddit. And so I was like, that's pretty crazy that this random guy is doing this. And so at that point I was like, can I come with my filmmaking partner, and can we come film you doing this? And we kind of just fell into it, didn't know what the story was going to be, and kind of turned it into like a little bit of a love story of creativity and of space and discovery. So it was kind of how we fell into it.
Mine, I had to make a senior thesis last year, so I had to come up with some idea, and I was getting a ride from my friend Nate, who was driving me back from Cleveland to Columbus, back to Ohio State, and he was like, do you mind if we just like go on the back roads, kind of stop a few places? I just need to do some sampling. He is a grad student at University of Alabama now graduated also, but I was like, sure, only take a couple minutes. So he's having us stop in Metro Parks on the side of a cornfield, and we're just digging up this kind of tall grass, and I was just kind of fascinated by how passionate he was talking about it, and how it just, it looks like nothing on the side of the road. It's like a weed on the side of the road, and he just really loved it, and honestly, it rubbed off, and I asked him if he wanted me to do it again, and I made it for my senior thesis.
So I was also a film student when I decided to make Superior Pho of Cleveland. It was actually one of my first projects in film school. It was one of my earlier sophomore projects. And at that time, it was spring of, I think, 2021. So the pandemic was like still freshly in our midst. And with that, I started hearing more about my family's heritage and like our refugee story. So I'm a first gen individual. My dad was a refugee from Vietnam, and so were a lot of like my aunts, uncles, grandparents, and it was coming over to America was something that really shaped our cultural identity. And I was born in Texas, and my parents just kind of moved our family out to Northeast Ohio, and there is not a very big Southeast Asian population here in Cleveland. But we immediately gravitated toward this restaurant, and when I was about 4 years old, we started going like every Sunday, every other Sunday. And the subject of the documentary, Nguyen, he became like a grandfather figure. He watched me grow up, and when I was given an assignment to make a micro doc, it had to be 3 minutes or under, otherwise I would have like had more of his anecdotes in there. I just saw it as a perfect opportunity to tell a story, especially since food content has its kind of like a built-in medium to unite people, and then tell the story of where the food came from. I just thought it was perfect. Yeah.
I work for Flex Media. We primarily focus on corporate video for renewable energy and public safety. And when the Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation reached out for us to do a video on this tree planting that they were going to, because they had already produced the sapling, it was successful. When they reached out to us, they just wanted a 3 to 5 minute video, just throw on YouTube, and I was like, this is Jesse Owens. Like, we can't just like make like a 3 to 5 minute video and throw it on YouTube. No one's ever gonna see it. We have to make this into like something bigger. And I think that if we finish this story, we'll be able to get it into a film festival, and it will see the people who need to see it will see it, and maybe they'll want to help with the project. So thankfully I was able to sway them. We got a bunch of different interviews with historical figures around the city. We got a relative of Jesse Owens, his cousin Tyrone Owens, and now we're here. And what really, like, why I really wanted to take this story on too is because I went to CSU, And sometimes I'd take the bus, and every day I'd take the bus, we would drive past the Jesse Owens statue. And I would I don't know, I was just fascinated by it. It was so cool to be able to I guess, make something that would help continue his legacy.
Most of the time, I make lots of fictitious movies, action, sci-fi, martial art movies. So this documentary was my second one I had done for my lifetime. We've been doing this since 1998, so over 22 years. The reason we started this, maybe into 2019, Lisa and I would talk about something to do with the Chinese American culture here, the members here. And we found out that Cleveland is celebrating 150 years anniversary back in 2020. Yeah, 2020. So we applied for a grant for the Cleveland Foundation and received a grant at the end of the year. And we decided to start planning again to put it together. Unfortunately, COVID hit, so everything got delayed a little bit, and we also found out that all the different people we wanted to interview just refused to be interviewed because COVID. They don't want to see us in person. They don't want to do Zoom because they're old. They don't know what to do with the computer. So it took a while to put this together, and what we've learned from this process was to learn a lot more from the community itself. We learned about the racism some people experience. We learned more about the Tong War that happened in Cleveland, where the two Chinese organizations fought against each other for territory, just like we have seen the different movies in San Francisco, New York City. We did happen one here in Cleveland, and bunch of different things. But it's at the end, the result we put together as a topic based on the theme, and then connect them all together. So we showed this early today, the 60 minutes version instead of the 80 minutes version.
Thank you. One thing that you said, you said the words love story, and that's what I think about a lot when I watch documentaries. Throughout my career, I have watched a lot of films and specifically a lot of documentaries, and that's one thing that I always found made a documentary a little bit more special when I see the love behind it. You see the filmmakers and everybody that's working on it, not only the passion to tell the story, but how they tell the story. But at the same time, that love story can only go so far. Everybody has challenges in life and whatever you do, and nobody necessarily really gets into documentary filmmaking to make a lot of money. It goes back to the fact that you all need to have a certain amount of passion to create the work that you've done, but you face a lot of challenges throughout that. And if you want to just all go down and then talk about the greatest challenge that you faced in the making of your film, and how you overcame it to not only complete the film but now to have it in a festival.
That's a good question. I think I don't necessarily recognize the challenges. I mean, there's always the money part. Thankfully, I'm lucky. I make films for, I make commercials, and that has allowed me to sort of have access to materials and talented people who will do things for me, as a favor or discounted rate. But it is, you still have to dump money into something that really this is probably not worth it to anyone else other than me and my partner. But I don't think that's even a challenge. Like, the challenge is just believing that continuing to have the belief that this is worth. Like, hey, yeah, this is worth it. I'm so happy for it. And to be honest, when you get to come to a festival like this and show it, it sort of pays it off. So for me, that's, I don't know. I don't really even think about the challenges in that way.
Can I pause really quick? Can we scoot over one so we're... Yeah. I'm so sorry. I feel awkward.
Or everybody.
Hey, whatever. I don't care. You don't have to follow me. It's okay. Sorry.
Because there's a chair over there. And
Yeah, so, for challenges, I'm sure all of us can talk about COVID as a challenge. I was making a film in Columbus while my subject was in Alabama. So I just tried to make it kind of build in the expectation, it was, early this year, things could go south and maybe I get COVID or whatever, blah, blah, So I think that was tough to kind of like have to build in kind of a remote editing thing, which sometimes is tough for me to edit alone. So sometimes just keeping up that motivation to that it's worth doing what I'm doing.
Since my documentary was not necessarily the longest, I think it might be the shortest one in this festival. I luckily didn't have that many challenges. I think the only one that I might consider is probably the communication gap between me and my subject, Nguyen. His first language is Vietnamese, and I consider him my elder. And I have very much deep respect for him, but he also has no idea what it takes to like put into making a film. So we showed up on set, and he was like, "Are we doing it now?" And I said yes, because we scheduled it. And he thought that it would just involve me like holding out my iPhone and recording him, but I had like a boom guy, I had like 2 camera angles on him, and I was like, "Can you give us a little time to set up first?" And luckily he was very like, "Oh yeah, sure." He was very cool about it. But I guess he didn't expect having such a long conversation, but ultimately it was fulfilling for both of us because we had like a 3-hour conversation on camera of me like asking him more about his story. But I think that's probably the most challenging part, but it wasn't really that hard at all.
I would say I had 2 very big challenges, I would say. Because I work in corporate video, I could not give this project my 100% attention. So there would be like, I'd work on it for like a month, and then I'd have to take 3 months off and come back to it. And that is very hard to be taken out of a story and then to have to come back into it. But what it taught me, like I was able to get away from it too. And as I was able to see like, okay, like maybe I was too connected to this piece that actually didn't matter. Another big challenge was finding B-roll that was in public domain. Because the events that took place are not more than 96 years ago, there isn't a ton of public domain footage out there, but there was thankfully enough. And due to budget constraints, we really couldn't pay for anything that would be usable. So I just kind of had to scour the internet and find what I could find. I kind of want to bring this up because this was I found a piece of B-roll, aerial footage of Cleveland from the 1920s. And I thought that was strange. Like, I was like, how do they have that? This doesn't make any sense. And then I went to the Cleveland Cinematheque last week to see a screening of Greed. And before that, they showed a short film that has been lost since 1924 called The Heart of Cleveland. And that footage came from that film. So I just it was almost like this movie was kind of making itself. I was just kind of the guy that was assembling everything.
Other than COVID, was one of the challenges we had, and then coordinating people and scheduling. The other way we have is we interview over 29 people and have more than 5 hours of footage on the timeline and trying to cut together in a way to make sense. And Nick and I, he's the editor, we often have lots of discussion, not heated, but frustrating discussion about who to leave it on, who to take it out, and then realize certain people talk too much and then trying to find out how to cut it out. Fortunately enough, we do own all the equipment, and we do have all the 2 different cameras for the shoot, so it was easy to cut somebody out or zoom somebody in because we shot everything in 4K. But overall, it's much more easier in that sense, and put it together in documentary. We used what we learned from doing a narrative feature film and put it in a way to apply in the documentary in this kind, so to make more story-like.
Thanks. And the reason why I asked that question is to kind of pull out that, not only the conversation, but everybody has a different challenge. I mean, and COVID definitely was a challenge in everything. And to be able to be not only, however you want to say, on the other side of COVID, whatever the side is, that we're all kind of able to look back and kind of like how we got through it. And that's, the same as creating a film, and especially a documentary where it has a life of its own. All of us have seen or even made documentaries where, it started off as something and turned into something else. Whether you're just watching the completed project where you're just like, wow, I didn't expect that. And then oftentimes the filmmakers didn't expect that, where a story can take multiple directions, and how do you capture that and be able to relay the story? And I think that, when you think about it, documentary filmmakers, more than, at least this is my opinion, not only do they create a film that's telling a story, it's how they explain it as well. Because yes, all of you can just literally just say, I made a documentary about this person or this thing, and this is what it is. But there's different ways that you're going to tell the story when you're showing it. Your Q&As after the screenings. Right now on this panel discussion, you're never going to be using the same words, but you kind of hone that story. So Johnny, I'm glad that you brought up editing, because at least in my opinion, editing is the most important factor in documentary film. So can you all kind of just go down, and then I'll open it up to any other questions. I'll just go down and kind of talk about your editing process, because I know that when I, a long time ago, was part of a film project, editing was the most difficult thing, because it is. What do you cut out? Because you grow attached to everything that you shoot. You grow attached to everything. You want to show everything, but it's impossible. So can you just describe your editing process a little bit? I know your answer, but how you kind of determine the length of your film, because documentaries, and narratives as well, you can tell a story in 3 minutes, or you can tell it in 5 hours. So how did you come to that decision, where you landed on the length of your film?
So this, I will often work with editors, but this one, my partner and I edited ourselves, and to be honest, we were stuck. We kind of knew we wanted it. It's a very sort of meditative film. It's meant to be slow but engaging, and because taking pictures of the stars takes a while, and we kind of wanted to play into it. And so that's kind of where the length, we just sort of let it breathe, and that we set that as a goal from the beginning and shot it a certain way. But we didn't know the story, and then I heard this speech that President Kennedy gave about wanting to go to the moon prior to launching. It's sort of a famous speech, and just sort of his vision for wanting to why we want to go to space. It's well, of course we want to go there. That's what we are as a species and a country, and so we anyway, that was this genesis of an idea, and then my partner had this brilliant idea to bring in all this footage from the 60s and take that idea of a moonshot, literally the moonshot, and tie it to what Andrew, our subject, was doing and taking pictures of the moon. And really the dream for both of them was the same. And so we kind of he had, Jay, my partner, had this brilliant discovery, and oh yeah, there's this idea of inspiring people, and that's why we look to the stars. Everyone sees something different up there, and in a way it's not new, but here's NASA doing it on the largest scale in humanity, and then here's this guy from Sacramento who armed himself with a DSLR camera and a telescope and took these incredible images and is taking the world to space in his own way. And so for me, that's once we figured that out, we're oh, the film kind of, after months, fell into place. So that was our experience.
I definitely can agree with the taking months. I feel mine took a long time. I just kind of I had the footage for a while. I was really early. I was doing great, and I just procrastinate, and just kind of sitting with moving it around and kind of just not knowing what it would be. But thankfully, similar to Rocky, I had an assignment, so it had to be under 15 minutes. So I was well, there's a start. So I was always, when people asked, I was always well, it'll be under this or blah blah blah. I just always had a different idea. It ended up being 8 minutes, and just kind of editing is always the toughest for me, just to wrap my head around it, because I have ideas, but sometimes I get to the timeline and I'm oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this idea, or it's just kind of harder than I thought. And I'm sure with having so much footage of interviews and choosing what to pick is nearly impossible, and I can't imagine doing it in feature or anything or having that much footage. But yeah, even just having hour or two interview, it's like, okay, I like this, and it's just, I think it's a process of, for me, it was showing people, like getting the text set so that I could, experiment with what I was going to show on top of that. Showing it to, people who were making it with me, just like, is this interesting to you? Because I like what he's saying. I was there, I asked him this question, I think this is fascinating, but people were like, if people didn't connect with that, or if it was just too, because he explained some science, so I was like, okay, this makes sense to me, but am I presenting it in a way that can be accessible to everyone? So kind of just coming back and forth and cutting here, but making sure the text was laid first so images could go on top.
No, you're good. So I did have the luxury of already having my exact time set out for me before I even started editing it, which was kind of a blessing and a curse because I knew what story I needed to tell, and I knew what parts to cut together to, say it concisely. And in a way, it kind of makes my microdoc like a shotgun blast of information all at once, because there's a couple beats where I wish I could have just held on that for a little longer so that you can really just kind of feel out the environment. But we just had to keep going. And I guess one of the more painful things is kind of like evaluating which anecdote you want to keep in. So I just decided to keep in like the big milestones that led up to the founding of the restaurant. But there was a story that I really wanted to keep in where Nguyen, after he immigrated to America, he had a sponsor, and he wasn't really particularly keen on, or he wasn't aware of like certain English phrases and vernacular. So when he was saying goodbye, he just had dinner with his sponsor. He was like saying goodbye, like out the front door, and his sponsor said, "See you later." And Mr. Nguyen took that literally, so he was like, oh, he wants to see me like later today. So he stayed on the porch for like 4 hours, and then his sponsor came out saying like, I'm sorry, do you need something? And they were like, you said see you later. This is later. And I just wanted to keep that in, but that would add like an additional like 2 minutes to the story. So I guess it's kind of a blessing that I did have the 3 minutes. But if I had more, I would just have been so much happier. But ultimately, it's a good fast medium to get what I needed to get out.
Bill, I'm so glad that you brought up that editing is the most important thing, because I'm an editor by trade, and I mean, like, I'm a jack of all trades, but editing is like my sweet spot, and you couldn't have said it better. Like, it's so true. Where I kind of started with this story, we had like a loose idea that we wanted it to be between 15 and 20 minutes. If it was going to be shorter, it was going to be shorter. If it was going to be longer, it was going to be longer, just depending on how succinct the story was. When I start with a story, what I like to do is I like to lay all the A-roll out, I like to cut it up, and I like to find the 2 best quotes that I think are going to stand out, because I think like if you start your story and end your story with like a quote that just really hits, then you can fill everything in between. And yeah, that might not be the easiest thing to do, but if you bookend your story with 2 really good quotes, that's just going to sell it. So yeah, I cut the A-roll. I did it in a linear fashion because I didn't want to go right into the tree, because I think, maybe at this festival it would have been fine, because people are here, they're sitting down, they want to see documentaries, so they're going to be interested either way. But I wanted to kind of tell the history of Jesse Owens and kind of run through his story, and then introduce that, oh hey, he's gone, and by the way, at the end of his life, he didn't have a really good go at it. He kind of died penniless, and a lot of people didn't really, there's movies about him, there's other documentaries about him, but like, how many of you knew that he won 4 Olympic gold medals? You just know he was an Olympic gold medalist in Germany in 1936. That might be the only thing that you know. So I wanted to like kind of tell his story and then go into the tree and kind of show you guys like, hey, like this is a piece of him, and it's going to be here to stay, and you guys can go and visit it and see it, and maybe you'll have like a nice warm feeling in your heart like I do when I drive past it.
just like Josh, we have a small production company and we do a lot of editing all the time, so that was never a problem for us editing-wise. For this documentary perspective-wise, we actually have a pre-production planning set up first, and we figure out how we want to lay it out in a certain topic. And then when we went to interview the people, we asked them 10 questions minimum, and based on the 10 different questions, we expanded to 15 to 20. And then once we have that, we put everything together on the timeline and sync out with the audio, and color code them per person. So make sure that we have this person with yellow color, this person with red color, this kind of blue color, and then highlight out a certain topic that we think is the most. And when we see 2 or 3 people are very much have the same answer, then we debate whether or not we want to keep this person or take this person out, or how many times we see this person on the timeline completely, and decide on whether or not we should put that person in, because we only see him like maybe 3 or 4 3 times only, whereas the other person we've seen it like 8 times. There's a couple people that unfortunately they talk forever, but they have so many great topics on it, the great comments, that we had to figure out how to cut him and put in different places on the timeline to make it work. And then luckily we did follow a little structure that we can actually be able to say, this is about the tone wars, and then we can put him here. This is about the racism. We can put his topic about his comments over here, and so on and so on, and expand it out. The plan was originally did it for only 70 minutes, and somehow that didn't happen. So we make it 80 minutes long. And when Chagrin Documentary Film Festival contacted me, they said it was too long for them. It get a little boring. So we decided to go back to the chopping board and cut off up to 60 minutes. So it's actually 59 minutes right now. So that's what's shown here today.
So yeah, I apologize. I have to run downstairs real fast. So I'm going to open this up to the floor if anybody has any questions, and I'll be right back. Anybody?
I was going to ask about the importance of music for your film, and when you start thinking about that during the process of filming. Critical. I mean, sound in general, I think a lot of times in docs, if I'm being truthful, is like something that gets forgotten. But like music can do everything for your film. And on this one, we filmed with our subject in the desert, and so we embraced a lot of the natural silence that was there. Like we were up all night, like watching this guy take pictures of the moon. It's very quiet and peaceful and sort of eerie, and we loved that. And then we partnered with a composer that I would like to work with, who's just totally brilliant, and he made this incredible soundtrack that we think supported the imagery really well. And for us, like that from the beginning, like we talked to Guido, our composer, before we started filming, and said, hey, we're gonna do this. Here's our subject's photos, like get inspired. We kind of talked about what we wanted, then we changed it all once we had the footage, and it was, not what we expected, which is kind of how it goes. And but for me, it's like, it's just as important, or maybe even sometimes more so than what you actually film.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thankfully, I had my friend also named Jeremy, who I went to school with, and we all went to, my subject, my composer, and I all went to high school together. So thankfully, it was kind of a built-in relationship and understanding of who this person was. So I was very fortunate to have him on the project, and kind of, he understood my idea because we're very close, and we have a good relationship, a creative relationship. And I was kind of just showing him early footage I shot, and just kind of explaining the idea, kind of giving him vague stuff, and kind of, we'd go back and forth. But towards the end of editing, I wanted it to be true to who our subject was, and also what the subject matter of the documentary was about. So it kind of ended up being this playful kind of electronic music, because it's kind of sciencey but kind of fun and light, and it's really fun. Every time I got a track from Jeremy, it was just exciting to put it in the timeline and kind of synthesize it with the whole thing, and it gave it so much energy and life. And I think that's really why I am so proud of the documentary, because of my friend's work on it. It's just, I think it covers up a lot of my rough edges, I've said to my friends.
So at the time that I made my microdoc, that was before I started working with the composer on higher level projects. So since it was 3 minutes, I was like, oh, no biggie, I'll just find a public domain song. And if you're into filmmaking, you kind of know that that takes a really long time because you're looking at like contrasting qualities of music. You're looking for different like vibes. And after maybe like 8 hours, I found an artist that I think goes by the name Kamiko. And I just found like a long version of a song that was like a breathy string instrumental. And I don't really have that much creative control over the song once you're like finding it for, instead of having it scored for you. So I just had to space it out in a way where it was emotionally impactful for the timeline and the A-roll sequence that I already had. So it actually worked out. Like it was a really lucky find because there are some parts where the music swells, where it's getting emotional, and then some parts where it's just kind of like it takes a back burner, and the story itself speaks for itself. But yeah, after that, I started working with a composer.
So we have a subscription service at Flex Media. It's called Soundstripe. There's various other ones like Epidemic Sound, Artlist, MusicBed. So we got all of our music from Soundstripe. And what I would do is I would lay the A-roll out, the interview footage, and then I found the song. And the way that like I picked songs was based on how I wanted the audience to feel at that moment in the film. So there's a period, like it's about the second part, where it talks about how Jesse Owens' family migrated from the South during the Great Migration. And I wanted to find something that was kind of, like big bandish, like 1920s, like kind of jazzish. So it took a while, but I was able to find something like that on Soundstripe. At the end, I wanted something that was like inspiring, so I found something that was inspiring. But to answer your question, I lay the A-roll and then I pick the music, and that kind of helps guide where the B-roll is going to be at as well.
For any kind of movies, sound and music is very important. And sometimes they say that if you have somebody sounds visually scratching or something doesn't work visually, but your music's good or your sound's good, people will forgive you. But if you go the other way around, people are gonna hate your gut forever. Luckily today, our visual has some glitches, but the audio is fine. So we usually do is I have a composer I've been working for almost 20 years now, and he's been doing all my movies, in short film, feature films, whatever, all the different films I made composed for them. And we always like to hire people to do music for us because it's much more personal. And when we win some awards, everybody winning or something. It's not just us. It's a team effort. So for this project, a documentary, because it's about 60 minutes long, 80 minutes. So I asked him to compose 5 different types of music. One is more sad, a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more frustration, and so on and so on. And then he watched a almost finished cut of the movie and just accordingly and gave me the music. We also thought about putting some sound like when there's a arrest going on, a Tong Wars time, when the different towns are fighting against each other, put some kind of background where you hear people fighting each other and stuff. But I think that was overkill, so we don't want to make it like a movie, but more like a documentary. So we eliminated all those background noises and just concentrate more on the music with the dialogue.
And thank you for that question, because it is clear that music really plays a role in the film itself too. So, any other questions? Because I have more in case you don't. Yeah.
I have a question around like making a documentary film. A lot of times you're playing a lot of the roles in the creation of it, and you're stretching yourself. Maybe if you could talk about a way that the creation of your film stretched you, so you're thinking, for the next film now I know how to do this.
Who wants to go first?
We could go this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let me go first. For me, every movie I make or every project we work together is a challenge. So if my movie or my project doesn't do better than the next one, then something's wrong with me. I should go do something else, not be a filmmaker. So it is very important, and yeah, it became a challenge for me in the sense of trying to take time because I am the director, I'm the editor also, I am also the producer, I'm also the person running the camera, running the lights, put everything together. Our crew is very small, it's just Nick and I, us, and then Lisa show up and then ask the questions, and that's it. And so, but because actually that's my smallest crew ever in my life. Every crew I have in my other projects over 10 people. So yeah, it's action movies. So it's challenging, but at the same time, for me, I always concentrate. If I'm sitting with Nick editing a project, then it was like, I'm here as a director, as a producer, and as an editor to see as a producer to see what everybody want to see. As an editor, I see whether or not my butt hurts. Every time I feel my butt is hurting, there should be a cut. Because of the commercials that we watch now. So that's how you actually quickly understand how to cut edit quickly. As a director, is whether or not my story, my vision is being translated out through the editor. So I have those three different hats sitting there doing it. At the same time, jogging and make it work. Sometimes that's the reason sometimes we have a lot of argument or discussion because his vision and what my vision doesn't connect together. But then after talking, after discussion, we realize, oh, okay, that makes it better. So, yeah.
I'm a bit of a maniac. So I put my entire heart into everything, and if everything is not perfect, I think it's the worst possible thing that I've ever done. And I always go into every project thinking that I'm a hack and this is not going to get finished, and somehow by the end it always does. I guess what stretches me thin is just like trying to remind myself like, hey, yeah, this might suck right now. The lighting might not be the best lighting that you could get, but like you only had an hour to set up, and that is what it is, and it looks good for what it is. And then like I said earlier, just kind of being pulled in and out of the project, that is very difficult because I want to produce something good, so I want to live with it every second of every day. And if I'm like focused on like these 5 other things that are going on, I worry that it's going to make this one thing suffer. But sometimes the best work comes out of pressure, so that's my 2 cents.
Yes, so by design, my documentary was a learning experience. And there's some technical things that I did oversee in this project because I was like 1/2 DP, director, producer, but it was like a 3-minute doc, so it wasn't really that difficult to wear so many hats in one project. So like technically speaking, like I'm not a DP. I'm like I work as a first AC occasionally for Transition Studios, but I learned, I was like, oh no, this is how exposure works on an FX5, and some other like small technical things. But in terms of production, luckily, everything was manageable. There was no like crazy emergencies during its production. But going forward, I was like, okay, as much as I do love having my vision come across, and like I have a very specific vision, I need help. So after that project, I would honestly refuse to like continue after getting greenlit unless I had a dedicated producer, a dedicated DP or camera person, a dedicated editor. And a lot of that is just kind of, networking with the people around you, pitching your projects, and kind of getting your ducks in a line before you start getting out of development and into pre-production. And that was just like a very like useful lesson. Luckily, I didn't have like a crazy tragic story to get me to that conclusion, but learning that made everything else so helpful. And I find that like, I have people and I bring them on, and when they have like notes about like their department, or my editor has notes like, no, this makes more sense if we switch this sequence. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. And the product is better because of it.
Thankfully, mine was a thesis project, so I kind of had more time than I ever had with any of my other projects in school. But these guys already said so much, very, very relatable, very, very apt. I think for me, trying to focus on the what is at forward, like what is present, like if I'm editing, I was helping a lot of other people on their other senior thesis, and everyone's like, "Oh, do you need help?" And I was like, "No, I can kind of just take my time on this." And it was sometimes that's tough because I had to actually take the time and just kind of spend time with it. Specifically in the editing, I think was what really stretched me the most. Just being patient and being okay with like imperfections. This is what I was able to get in this moment, and that's okay, and we can work with it. And just kind of taking your time and believing in yourself that you can do what is in front of you, I guess.
Those are great answers. I think every project you're learning something, and you do wear a lot of hats, and it's great when you have help. And what's nice about documentary is that you can sort of sometimes bridge over the moments when you don't. I shot a lot on this film. It's not my strength, but you get through it, and we were filming at night, and it was like a challenging environment to do that. But one thing that I like about the process is I tend to look at all of the limitations of a particular project as a chance to do something differently. So for this one, we were going to be out in nature, and I couldn't set up lights, and I was like, well, maybe we just don't do an interview. And so I went from the beginning of, okay, well, we're going to do an unstructured doc, and just sort of, okay, well, we'll remove that as a tool in our toolkit, and then we'll improvise and come up with something different. And I'd not done that before with the film, and I think it has made me a stronger filmmaker. So I think looking at ways to stretch yourself is like embracing the challenge or as like an opportunity to do something a little bit differently and try to make a film that is unique and become, in the end, it like just helps you become a better filmmaker, better storyteller.
Thank you. Again, I'll wrap this up with one more question. I know that, I think there's a little bit of time after this, so, anybody wants to, continue the discussion, like, I think, standing around for a little bit. There's some time. But you all kind of answered this last question in a different way, but in one word or one sentence, what is one thing, now that you have a completed documentary that is, has screened at a festival, at least one festival, what is one thing that you learned, whether it's about the filmmaking, yourself, the world, that you will walk away from this experience and try to share?
Oh, man. You want to go first?
No, that's okay.
Oh. I don't have a good answer to that. I will say that if you are free today at 4 o'clock, they're playing it here, and it's short. It's really good. I'm very proud of it. And the thing that maybe I'll just tell you what I'm most excited about is my 4-year-old son is going to be here to watch, and he's 4 and he grew up in the pandemic. He's never been to a movie before, and so the first time that he'll see a movie in a theater, I guess this is a theater, will be my movie, and so I'm pretty excited and proud of that. So come and join.
I will say that you can make people interested or excited about anything, I think, in documentary. I think that speaks to the strength of the form, because people were telling me, I don't care at all about this invasive grass the whole time I was making it.
I guess when you're in filmmaking and you like initially choose your story, it's a little different from when you're like working on it for multiple weeks at a time, and you sometimes get desensitized to like the jokes that are in your film or like the really poignant like emotional beats, and ultimately you just have to trust the process. And if it truly is an important story, like people will see it regardless of what little like sequences that you wish you could change, or if you wish that like the color palette was a little different, because honestly the beauty of documentary is like it literally speaks for itself.
I would say that I can do this, like I can actually do this, and people are like, kind of like, to piggyback off what you said, people are a lot more forgiving of the mistakes that you see that they don't see.
Everything they just said. Also, maybe after this project, we got other people come up to us and appreciate the story, the telling, the memories they brought in. When I first did the first screening, we have lots of Asian American people show up and they actually cry to the movie. I thought it was bombing. I thought they hated the movie because that's why they're crying. But it turns out it's the other way around because so I was so nervous about that. It's time to move on. It's something that I did and I'm very proud of it. I should be proud of it, otherwise I shouldn't be a filmmaker. And do your best, move forward, and do something new and do a better job.
Thank you all. And I just want to thank the Chagrin Documentary Film Festival, Marianne Ponce, all the staff and volunteers, not only for bringing me back, but putting on this amazing festival in Chagrin Falls. Thank you all for sharing your stories, and then thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.